Okay, let's dive deep today into what feels like the absolute bedrock of contract law, the offer.
It really is fundamental, isn't it?
Totally. And this isn't just textbook stuff. It's about spotting that crucial first step in making a promise legally binding.
Hmm.
And this deep dive, it's crafted specifically for you listening, using the materials you've shared to help us really unpack what makes an offer.
Yeah, what doesn't?
Exactly. And critically, how that initial spark, that offer can just fizzle out before a contract is even formed.
Understanding the offer, it's truly foundational. It's that essential communication, the signal of willingness to be bound,
Right.
and missing the nuances here, or uh, failing to see how an offer might just end. That
Hmm.
can unravel a whole potential agreement. It's a common pitfall.
So, our mission today: get a handle on the core idea of a contract, pinpoint what makes a valid offer, learn to tell it apart from everything else, and yeah, spend good time on all the ways an offer can simply end before acceptance.
Sounds like a plan. We've got some great materials to work with here.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. What is a contract, fundamentally?
Well, the materials highlight it's more than just, an everyday promise you might make. It's a promise between two parties that creates an actual obligation.
An obligation the law backs up.
Precisely. Enforceable by law. That enforceability is the absolute key.
Right, because agreeing to meet a friend for coffee, that's usually not something you sue over.
Exactly. So the core definition is an agreement giving rise to obligations that are recognized and enforceable by law. It's often called the glue holding business deals together. Make sure people stick to their commitments.
And the materials mention different ways these agreements can actually look, right? Not just written down.
Correct. You've got your simple contracts. These can be oral, written, sometimes a mix of both, or even just implied by how people act.
Implied by conduct.
And then you have the more formal ones, special contracts or
Mhm.
contracts under seal. You often hear them called deeds.
Deeds. Those sound serious.
They are. They need specific formalities, must be written, signed, witnessed, sealed, and delivered. The materials even distinguish between a deed poll that's by one party and an indenture, which involves more than one party.
Interesting distinction. So formality definitely matters there. But whether it's super formal or just simple, the law looks for this meeting of minds, doesn't it?
That's the core idea. Consensus ad item, as the Latin phrase goes. The law needs to be able to objectively see that the parties genuinely agreed on the same thing.
Even if nothing's written down.
Even then, though, as the materials wisely note, writing things down is always a good idea for clarity.
Yeah, avoids arguments later. The materials also quickly mention some other things, like contract formalities and the parole evidence rule in Singapore's Evidence Act, sections 93 and 94.
They do, but we'll maybe put a pin in that for
Yeah,
now.
good idea. Keep the focus.
Because today, we're really zeroing in on the building blocks needed to objectively find that meeting of minds. The materials list four essential elements: offer, acceptance.
Together, they make the agreement.
Right. The intention to create legal relations in consideration.
Hmm.
And our main focus for this deep dive is squarely on that first vital element, the offer.
Okay, let's unpack that. What exactly is an offer in the eyes of the law?
Well, the materials describe it as an expression by one party that's the offerer to another party, the offeree,
Okay.
communicating their willingness to perform a promise or, undertake some task. It's a clear statement showing they intend to be bound if the other party just says yes.
And who can you make this offer to? Just one person.
It could vary quite a bit. The materials say it could be aimed at a specific person only they can accept.
Makes sense.
Or it could be a class or group of people anyone in that group can accept. Or, and this is where things get really interesting legally,
Mm.
it can be made to the world at large.
The whole world. Wow. Okay, this sounds like where that famous case comes in. Carlyle and Carbolic Smoke Ball Co.
Absolutely. It's the classic example. The company advertised this product, the smoke ball, and promised 100 pounds to anyone who caught the flu after using it correctly.
Right, I remember this one.
And to show they were serious, they even said they'd put 1,000 pounds in a bank. So Mrs. Carlyle, she used it as directed, still got the flu, and tried to claim the 100 pounds.
And the company refused.
They did. They argued the ad was just, marketing hype, a mere puff, not a real offer anyone could accept.
But the court saw it differently.
Completely. Found for Mrs. Carlyle. The court said the terms in the ad were specific enough, and that 1,000-pound deposit, that showed a clear intention to be bound.
So the deposit was key evidence of intent.
Exactly. And the court called this a unilateral contract, basically an offer made to the whole world. accepted by performing the conditions laid out in the offer. No need for Mrs. Carlo to formally say, I accept beforehand. Using the ball as it directed was enough.
Okay, so that's a crucial takeaway from Carlo. An advertisement can be an offer.
If the intention to be bound is crystal clear.
Right. Which, as the materials point out, is different from the general rule about ads.
And that general rule brings us to a really critical distinction. Offer versus invitation to treat, or ITT.
Ah, yes. This one trips students up all the time. What's the absolute core difference we need to remember?
It boils down to the offer's intention at that specific moment. With a real offer, the person making it intends to be bound as soon as the other party accepts the terms. Simple as that.
Okay.
But with an invitation to treat, they're not ready to be bound yet. They're basically just opening the door to negotiations, inviting others to come and make an offer to them.
So an ITT is more like saying, hey, I'm interested in selling this. What are you willing to pay? Rather than, I'll sell this for £50, just say yes.
That's a great way to put it. Accepting an ITT doesn't create a contract. It's just the start of the dance, the negotiation.
Got it. And the materials give some classic examples of things usually considered ITTs, right? Like most advertisements.
Yes, general ads are the prime example. The case Partridge and Crittenden is mentioned. An advert for selling wild birds.
Which was illegal to offer for sale.
Right. The court found the ad was just an ITT, not an offer to sell. It lacked that clear promise and demonstrated intent found in Carlo. It was just saying, I have these birds, anyone interested in making an offer?
Okay, so Carlo is the exception. Partridge is more the rule for ads. What about stuff displayed in shops?
Another classic ITT scenario. Think about Pharmaceutical Society and Boots Limited. This was about a self-service pharmacy. The question was, when did the actual sale contract for medicines happen?
Was it when the customer picked the item off the shelf?
That's what one side argued, but the court said no. The display of goods on the shelf, that's just an ITT, an invitation.
So the shop isn't offering to sell you everything on display?
Not yet. The customer makes the offer when they take the item to the cashier.
Ah, okay. And the cashier accepts.
The cashier accepts that offer.
Yeah.
Usually by ringing it up and taking payment, that's when the contract is formed.
So putting something in your shopping basket doesn't legally bind you to buy it. Phew.
Exactly. You're just signaling you intend to make an offer soon. Auctions operate similarly.
How so?
The auctioneer calling for bids, displaying the item that's the ITT. Each bid from the audience is an offer.
And the hammer coming down?
That's the acceptance of the highest offer. Contract formed. Same logic for tenders. Inviting companies to submit tenders for a project.
That's the ITT.
Right. Each submitted tender is an offer. The party inviting the tenders then chooses one and accepts it. That acceptance forms the contract.
So it seems like the courts really have to look beyond the surface. How do they actually decide if it's an offer or just an ITT? It sounds quite context dependent.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
The materials emphasize an objective approach. Courts look at all the facts and evidence, the specific words used, the surrounding circumstances, the party's actions. Like that bank deposit in Carlo.
They ask what a reasonable person would think the intention was.
Exactly. What would a reasonable person, looking at everything, conclude about whether the person intended to be bound right then and there?
Okay, that makes sense. So we have offers, we have ITTs, but the materials also mention other kinds of statements that might seem important but aren't offers either.
All right, two key ones are mere supply of information and mere puffs.
Mere supply of information. That sounds pretty straightforward. Just giving facts?
Pretty much. It's providing details or maybe potential terms, but without making that firm commitment or promise needed for an offer. Harvey and Facey is the go-to case.
The telegram case. Harvey sends a telegram asking two things.
Hmm.
Will you sell us bumper haul pen? Telegraph lowest cash price?
And Facey replies only to the second question, telegraphing back, lowest price for bumper haul pen, £900.
Then Harvey sends another telegram saying, we agree to buy bumper haul pen for the sum of £900 asked by you. Contract.
Harvey thought so, but the court said no. Facey's telegram stating the lowest price wasn't an offer to sell at that price. It was only answering the question about the lowest price, just supplying information.
So is Harvey's second telegram, the we agree to buy one, that was actually the first offer?
Exactly. And Facey never accepted that offer, so no contract. It really shows that just stating your bottom line isn't necessarily an offer to deal at that price.
Context is everything. Okay, then what about mere puffs?
These are the kind of statements that are clearly over the top, obvious exaggerations.
Sales talk?
Yeah, sales talk, marketing hype, things said to grab attention or generate interest. But they're so far-fetched that no reasonable person would actually believe them to be a serious, binding promise.
Like the Leonard and Pepsi Inc. case, the Harrier jet.
Precisely. Pepsi ran this promotion where you could collect points for merchandise. The ad jokingly showed a kid landing a Harrier jump jet at school with text saying 7,000 Pepsi points.
And someone actually tried to claim it.
Leonard did. He gathered the points, or the cash equivalent allowed, and demanded the jet.
What did the court say?
The court basically said, come on. It was clearly humorous exaggeration, a puff. No reasonable person watching that ad would think Pepsi was genuinely offering a multi-million-dollar military aircraft for Pepsi points. It wasn't a serious offer.
Okay, so an offer needs that clear, serious expression of willingness to be bound. It has to be different from an ITT, just giving info, or obvious puffs. And crucially, it has to actually reach the intended person, right?
Absolutely fundamental. An offer has zero legal effect until it's communicated to the offeree. You simply cannot accept an offer you don't know exists.
That seems logical. The case mentioned is Fitch and Snedeker.
That's the one. A reward was offered for information leading to an arrest. Someone provided the crucial information, but they did it before they knew about the reward offer.
So they couldn't claim the reward afterwards.
Correct. The court held they weren't entitled to it because their act of giving the information wasn't done in response to the offer. They were ignorant of it. So it couldn't be acceptance. The materials also mention R and Clark as illustrating a similar point.
It fits with that meeting of minds idea again. You can't agree to something you're completely unaware of.
Exactly. So, okay, let's imagine we have a valid offer. It's clear, it's serious, it's been communicated. Does it just hang there forever waiting for someone to say yes?
I'm guessing not. This is where termination comes in, right?
Hmm.
Offers don't last forever.
They certainly don't. They can cease to exist, terminate before they're accepted. And understanding how they terminate is super practical for analyzing legal problems.
Right. So what are the ways an offer can end before acceptance?
The materials outline several distinct methods. First up, and maybe the most obvious, is withdrawal or revocation.
The offer just takes it back.
Yep. They can withdraw the offer any time before it's been accepted. But, and this is crucial, the withdrawal has to be communicated to the offeree.
It's not enough for the offeror to just change their mind.
No, the offeree has to know about it. And it's effective only when the offeree receives notice of the revocation, not when the offerer sends the notice. That's the principle from Byrne and Van Tienhoven.
Okay, received, not sent. Does the notice have to come directly from the offerer?
Interestingly, no. The materials mention Dickinson and Dodds, which established that if the offeree finds out the offer has been withdrawn from a reliable third party, that's good enough. The offer is revoked.
So if my reliable friend tells me the person who offered me their car has just sold it to someone else, I can't then rush to accept the original offer.
Generally, no. You have reliable information, the offer's off the table. Also, revocation can happen if the offerer makes a fresh offer that clearly replaces the earlier one. Bank Paribas and Citibank N.A. Limited is cited for that.
What if the offerer says the offer will be open for, say, a week? Are they stuck waiting the whole week?
This is a really key point that often catches people out. Just saying this offer is open for 6 weeks doesn't legally bind the offer to keep it open that long unless something else is going on.
Like what?
Like a separate agreement to keep the offer open, supported by consideration. We call that an option.
So if I pay you £10 to keep your offer to sell me your bike open until Friday, then you're bound.
Then I'm bound by that separate option contract. But without that, the promise to keep the main offer open is generally not binding. The case Routledge and Grant illustrates this. Grant offered to buy Routledge's house and said he needed an answer within 6 weeks.
And he withdrew the offer before the 6 weeks were up.
He did, and the court said that was perfectly fine, because Routledge hadn't provided any consideration for Grant's promise to keep the offer open for that period. So Grant was free to revoke it any time before acceptance.
That's a really important practical point about promises to keep offers open. Okay, so that's withdrawal. What's another way an offer can die?
By the offeree's own actions. Rejection.
Simple enough if the offeree says no thanks.
Pretty much. If the offeree clearly indicates they're rejecting the offer, whether in writing, orally, or maybe even by their conduct, the offer is terminated.
Does the rejection also need to be communicated?
Yes. Like withdrawal, rejection needs to be communicated to the offerer to take effect. Once it's communicated, the offer is dead, extinguished. The offerer can't change their mind later and try to accept it.
Okay. What if the offeree doesn't just say no, but comes back with, yes, but I want it delivered next Tuesday, when the offer didn't mention delivery?
Now you're likely moving into the third method. Counteroffer.
This is where the offeree tries to change the terms.
Exactly. If the offeree responds to the offer but introduces a new term or changes an existing one, that response is usually treated as a counteroffer, not an acceptance.
And what does a counteroffer do to the original offer?
This is critical.
Yeah.
A counteroffer kills the original offer. It operates as a rejection of the original terms and proposes a new offer. The offeree cannot then backtrack and accept the original offer they just implicitly rejected. Acceptance must mirror the offer, exactly, be unconditional.
The classic case here is Hyde and Wrench, right?
The very one. Wrench offers to sell his farm for £1,000. Hyde responds by offering £950.
That's the counteroffer.
Correct. Wrench rejects the £950. Then Hyde says, okay, fine, I'll pay the original £1,000.
But it was too late.
Too late. The court held Hyde's £950 counteroffer had destroyed Wrench's original £1,000 offer. There was nothing left for Hyde to accept when he tried to agree to the £1,000. No contract.
Wow, that's a really sharp legal consequence. A counteroffer is powerful.
It really is. And the materials note, sometimes it's tricky to tell a counteroffer from just a request for more information. Asking, would you consider £950 might be just an inquiry, not necessarily a counteroffer that kills the £1,000 offer. It depends on the precise wording and context.
Nuance matters. Okay, what's next on the list of terminations?
Number 4 is lapse of time. Offers don't stay open forever.
If the offer itself sets a deadline.
Yes. If the offer says you must accept by 5 p.m. Friday, the offer automatically terminates if it's not accepted by then. Any attempt to accept at 5:01 p.m. is too late, ineffective. The materials mention Wia De Lian and Teo Siak Wang in relation to implied time limits too.
What if no specific time is mentioned in the offer? Does it stay open indefinitely?
No. The law implies a term that the offer will lapse after a reasonable time.
And reasonable depends on.
Totally depends on the circumstances. What's the subject matter? Shares might have a very short reasonable time due to market fluctuations.
Yeah.
Land might have longer. Perishable goods, very short. It's assessed objectively based on the context.
Okay, reasonable time. Got it. Method 5.
Failure of condition. An offer might be made subject to a particular condition continuing to exist.
Explicitly or implicitly?
Either. It could be an express condition. I offer to buy your car subject to it passing its MOT test, or an implied one, like an offer to hire someone implies they remain alive and capable of working. If the condition fails, the car fails its MOT, the person dies, the offer automatically terminates. Financing's limited, and Stimson limited is the case reference here.
So if the fundamental basis of the offer disappears, the offer disappears too.
Essentially, yes. And that leads to the final method mentioned, death.
Whose death matters? Offerer. Offeree.
It can be either. In certain circumstances, the death of the offerer or the offeree before acceptance will terminate the offer. The specifics can get a bit complex depending on whether the offer involved personal services, for example.
Okay, so, wow, that's quite a list. Withdrawal, rejection, counteroffer, lapse of time, failure of condition, death. It really highlights how fragile an offer is before it's locked down by acceptance.
It absolutely does. Knowing these termination routes is crucial. You have to check. Was there a valid offer? Was it communicated?
Yeah.
And critically, was it still alive and capable of acceptance when the supposed acceptance happened? Or had it already terminated via one of these methods?
Right.
Getting this offer stage right, understanding what it is, how it differs from other statements, and especially how it can end, it's just so fundamental. It's not just definitions, it's the analytical skill to see if that initial necessary step for a contract actually existed and survived long enough.
Absolutely. So here's something to mull over as you continue your studies. Think about today's world. Super fast communication, online deals happening in seconds. How did these traditional rules about offer termination, like needing to communicate a withdrawal, or the instant death effect of a counteroffer, how do they really function in practice with email chains, instant messaging negotiations, or clicking buy now online? Does knowing these specific termination triggers change how you might advise someone who thinks they have a deal or who wants to back out of one? What are the real-world sticking points these distinct termination methods create? Happy studying. Until the next class.